again, and welcome to another short story reading. My name is Catherine H. Ayers, writer, illustrator, and mama, and this is Everett. Thank you, Everett, and thank you, viewer, for coming and watching my video. Excuse me for the clinking sound in the background. That is Everett playing with his Lincoln Logs. Today I will be reading a children's fantasy story that I was working on the last 2 weeks. The story idea came to me earlier this year, and I'll tell you where the idea came from, and also a book that might have inspired the genre of the story. And without further ado, and if Everett doesn't have anything else to say, we will begin. A Wizard for a Grandfather. Lance stood on his grandfather's porch, nervous to the bone. His mother stood next to him, holding his little brother Benji's hand. "Lance," his mother said, "you are 12 years old now. I trust that you will do a good job. All you need to do is take care of your grandfather's dog while he's away. I'll be back in the evening to pick you two up. Take care not to let anything go wrong. Grandfather is very particular." Lance swelled up with pride and said, "Yes, ma'am." Benji looked at him, stuck his tongue out, and shook his head. Lance looked back through his glasses with a stony stare fit for a soldier. Lance's mother was reprimanding Benji for the funny face when the door opened and the scariest man Lance had ever known stepped out. He was so tall, his tidy gray hair almost touched the top of the door frame. His arms were long and thin, and he had a short, pointed gray beard. He was the most awe-inspiring yet terrifying person in the entire world. This was Lance's grandfather, and he was a wizard. He looked down at Lance with his piercing glare, and then back up at Lance's mother. "You trust these two will take proper care of Capricorn and Willow?" "Yes, I know they will," replied Lance's mother, not too assuredly. Grandfather stepped down the stairs lightly and adjusted the cufflinks on his sleeve, looking out at the soft gray day. Lance's mother winked at Lance and his little brother. "I know you will both do a splendid job, only—" She leaned close so that Grandfather couldn't hear. "Please don't let Benji touch anything he isn't supposed to. Grandfather doesn't understand that Benji has the self-control of a puppy." "Yes, ma'am," Lance said, looking at Benji, who was trying to peer into the house with curiosity. "Capricorn's pills are on the counter," Grandfather said, turning back to them. "Make sure to give him one at the top of each hour. Do not forget." "Yes, sir," Lance said, feeling the urge to salute. Grandfather turned back to his car and nodded. "Well, Willow, shall we then?" Lance's mother took her father's arm, and they walked together to the car. Watching them made Lance realize just how similar his mother and grandfather were, both tall and swift on their feet. "Take care," Lance's mother said. "We'll be back by dark. Make sure to keep an eye on your brother." "I packed his book in the duffel bag." Lance waved at his mother and grandfather as the car pulled out of the long driveway and disappeared. "Okay, Benji. We have to take extra care not to do anything rash or crazy," Lance said, still staring after his grandfather. "We've got to make sure we make Grandfather proud. Right, Benji?" "Benji?" Lance turned around to find the door was wide open and Benji was running through the foyer. "Wait! Stop!" Lance lugged the heavy duffel bag inside after Benji. He made sure to close the door behind him and check his watch. It was 2:30. Not time for Capricorn to take his pill just yet. When Lance looked up from his watch, the thought of Capricorn and Benji floated out of his head. The whole house buzzed with the sounds of magic. Lance had only been to his grandfather's house a few times, and it never ceased to amaze him. The carpet was ever-changing. Sometimes it was red wool, then a dark violet silk. Other times the carpeting would change to simple hardwood floor, stone, or tiles. Today the carpet was all fresh green grass that waved as if the wind were blowing, though there wasn't a draft in the house. "How are you today?" said the white pony statue that sat in the corner. "Remember to hang your hat." Lance removed his hat and hung it on the coat hanger. The coat hanger was built of skeleton hands, and Lance was quick to move on from it. The coat hanger, along with many things in the house, Lance had to admit, creeped him out, especially since he had seen the skeleton hands move once or twice. Lance walked through the hallway and tried to divert his eyes from the living room. As he walked past the ever-moving blue glow from the living room, his eyes moved to the top of the staircase. Upstairs. He got goosebumps just thinking about Grandfather's workshop. Lance thought for a brief moment about going upstairs to take a look. Just a peek. He knew his mother had told him not to go snooping around, but he thought that was because of Benji and not him. Benji was sure to make a mess of things if he let Benji snoop around. But Lance wasn't a snooper, for sure. He was only a looker. And at the thought, Lance realized Benji was nowhere in sight. Lance tread through the foyer into the kitchen. Despite the rest of the house's unique decoration, the kitchen was just a regular, boring, old person's kitchen, with an old-fashioned teapot sitting on an old gas fire stovetop. There was a china cabinet full of ugly cups beside the back door that led to a large backyard. Next to the door was a lumpy towel, probably being used to soak up a leak. Benji was standing on a stool looking through one of the topmost cabinets in the pantry. "Benji!" Lance cried, running over to his brother and grabbing hold of the rickety old stool, threatening to topple over. "What are you doing?" "I'm just looking for a treat to give Capricorn," Benji said, and opened a bag of crackers. He tasted one. "That is stale," Benji said, and put the bitten cracker back in its place. "Get down," Lance commanded, "and we shouldn't give Capricorn any treats. He's sick, remember?" "Are you sure he's sick?" Benji asked. "He says he feels fine." Lance looked around the kitchen floor. "Where is Capricorn?" "Lance, you're going to step on him." Lance looked down to find that the towel on the floor was not, after all, a towel, but Capricorn. Capricorn lifted up his prune-like face and stared into Lance's with sad, round, drippy eyes. He looked almost deflated. Hence the reason Lance mistook him for a dirty towel. "Benji, that dog is sick," Lance said. "We've got to make sure to take good care of him." Lance checked his watch. "It's not time to give him his pills yet," he mumbled and set a timer. "Then what do we do?" Benji groaned and sat on the floor next to Capricorn. "Can I play with Capricorn out in the yard?" "No," Lance said. "First of all, Capricorn's too sick to play, and second, I don't trust that you'll not mess anything up. Sit down and read your book." Lance handed Benji his book from the duffel bag, and Benji took it begrudgingly to the table. "I don't want to. I hate it," he complained. "Then you'll never learn to read," Lance said, picking up his own book he was supposed to be reading for school. "I don't want to read how Jane can and Jane can't. Who cares about Jane? I want to explore the house with Capricorn." "Be quiet," Lance said, and sat down next to Benji with his own book. He was supposed to be finished with the book already, but he hadn't started it yet. His mother had told him that this would be a great opportunity to at least start the book. A few good minutes into it, however, Lance was thoroughly disappointed that the women in the book were not little. They were of regular height. There was not actually any little women in the whole book. Not that he had a problem with people of regular height. It was only that they were so very boring. 15 minutes went by, and Lance's mind had been wandering up the stairs in Grandfather's study as he read. "You know the reason Mother proposed we didn't have presents this Christmas was. You know the reason Mother proposed we didn't have presents this Christmas was. You know the reason Mother proposed we didn't have presents this Christmas was. You know the reason Mother proposed we didn't have presents this Christmas was." Lance realized he had read the sentence over a dozen times when he looked up from his book to find Benji had fallen asleep. The alarm went off on his watch. Lance quickly turned it off and looked for the pills. He found them sitting on the kitchen counter atop a note. "1 pill at the beginning of every hour," it said, but he gave no instructions on how he was supposed to give Capricorn the pills. "Come here, boy," Lance said. Capricorn looked at him with forlorn eyes and did nothing. "Okay, then," he sighed, taking the small round tablet and lifting up Capricorn's saggy jowls. He slid the pill in through the gap in the dog's teeth. "There, that should do it," Lance said, standing up and wiping the thick slobber off on his pants. Capricorn sat up and spat the pill out on the floor. No, you're supposed to eat it," Lance said, picking up the pill and trying again. Only moments later, the pill was back on the floor. Lance imagined his grandfather coming home to a dead dog and a guilty, useless grandson. So he rushed over to the refrigerator and searched through the many, many vegetables to find a piece of cheese or meat, something that a dog would eat. But it was all root vegetables and fruit. Is grandfather a vegetarian? Lance thought, looking through a container of fleshy-colored mush. He discovered upon tasting it that the mush was mashed squash, or something of the like. He took a spoonful and buried the pill in the mush, and then slopped it in the dog bowl. Capricorn leapt up, and to Lance's surprise, lapped the mush up until it was completely gone. "There we go, good boy." Quite pleased with himself, Lance glanced over at his brother. Benji was creating a sea of drool on the table, and his arm was now dangling over a long-forgotten book on the floor. "Wonderful," Lance whispered, and tiptoed out of the room. The carpet had changed again from grass to moss. Lance followed the trail of moss upstairs. He crept cautiously through the hallway, staring at each crystal and carved stone that hung on the wall, wondering what they did. Finally, he came to a great wooden door, the door that led to Grandfather's workshop. Holding his breath, he pushed it open. The door swung and creaked, leading to a dark room. There was a faint glow of a potion quietly bubbling in the corner. Lance stepped on the squeaky floorboards one by one until he switched on the light. 5 orange lamps slowly illuminated, and an old record player began softly spinning a Chopin song. Grandfather's desk was strewn with trinkets, potions, and books, though thrown about in an orderly fashion, organized in Grandfather's own way. The whole wall at the end of the room was covered in pinned-up insects, and sitting on the shelves on the other wall were artifacts that were collected from his grandfather's adventures. Though what sparked Lance's interest the most was the wand. It was wooden and twisted, stained in some spots darker than others. It was sitting on a book perfectly aligned with the desk. Lance reached his hand out to touch it, but his hand only hovered inches away. Suddenly, the sound of something very heavy hitting the ground snapped Lance out of his trance. He swung around to find Benji standing next to Capricorn with his hands spread out and a crystal ball rolling out of the door towards the stairs. "Benji!" cried Lance, making a run for the fragile ball and pulling out his hair as he did so. It reached the edge just as Lance did, and he was just in time to catch it before it met its demise. "Benji!" Lance yelled, running back to the workshop. "Don't touch anything!" But Benji already had the wand in his hands and was waving it around like a sword. Lance snatched it from his little brother and set it back on the book. He straightened it to the way it was before. "Out! Now!" Lance yelled, disturbing the quiet wonder of the workshop and pushing Benji and Capricorn out the door, shutting it hard behind him. "You aren't allowed in Grandfather's study." "You aren't allowed in Grandfather's study," Benji protested as he was jostled down the stairs towards the kitchen. "Mama said we can't go in there." "She was saying that to you, not me," Lance said, sitting with his own book and turning back to the sentence he had been reading. Capricorn sat next to Lance and set his slobbery face on Lance's lap. "Good boy, Capricorn," he said. Capricorn stuck out his tongue and spat out something. Lance picked it up and inspected it with wide eyes. It was the pill. "He didn't need it." "Of course not," said Benji. "Who likes to take medicine?" "Benji," Lance said, standing up and running to the cupboard. "Help me find a treat for Capricorn." "I thought you said—" "Forget what I said," Lance said, pulling out a box of stale crackers. "We need to get Capricorn to take his pills on time." "Okay," Benji said, and began pulling out pots and pans from a cabinet. "Stop! What do you think you're doing?" "I'm looking." "There isn't going to be any treats in there, you dunce. Go try to find where the dog food is kept." Benji rolled his eyes and went off to the screen and porch and began tearing it apart. Lance wanted to stop him, but he had to get Capricorn to take the pill. He grabbed a cracker and scraped a pill-sized hole in it with a fork and stuffed the pill in. Capricorn ate it, and this time Lance made sure to pry Capricorn's mouth open to see if he had swallowed. Lance didn't see it, so it was safe for him to assume that the dog had eaten the pill. Lance looked up to find that the entirety of the screen and porch had been destroyed. It reminded him of how a village might look after it had been pillaged by Vikings. "Benji!" he shouted, pulling his little brother out of the room and setting him on the floor next to Capricorn, who was now nuzzling Benji with his big wet nose. Lance began cleaning it up and wouldn't let Benji so much as move an inch from the spot until he had finished putting everything away. By this time, Capricorn was jumping around Lance's legs, looking much happier and ready to play. "Okay," Lance sighed, adjusting his glasses. "Benji, you take Capricorn out to play fetch in the backyard. I'm going to do some reading." Benji looked delighted. "Absolutely," he said. "Right. Just don't come back until I say so." Benji and the now leaping Capricorn shuffled into the backyard, leaving the back door open behind him. Shutting the door, Lance finally had enough silence to read his book. Or at least try to. You know, the reason Mother proposed we didn't have presents this Christmas was, what would Lance want for Christmas? Probably to find out he had the talent for magic. Benji burst into the room with Capricorn at his heels. "I told you not to come in," Lance said. I'm going back out," Benji said. "I'm just trying to find something for Cap to play fetch with." "Okay, just hurry out. I'm having a hard time focusing. And since when do you call him Cap?" "He wanted me to call him Cap," Benji said. "That's what Grandfather calls him." Benji rushed into the house and had soon made his way out again, leaving the door open, as was his habit. Lance sighed again and shut the door behind them. He stood for a moment watching Benji play fetch with Capricorn. Then he looked back at the open book on the table and thought about magic. He had always wondered if he would be able to do magic. He knew his mother was never able to figure it out, but that didn't mean he couldn't. His grandfather was a wizard, after all. Lance looked out the window once more and then turned back towards the foyer. Across the now marble carpet, Lance padded upstairs again towards the workshop. At the end of the hall, the door had been left open. Lance had correctly remembered shutting the door himself. Heart thumping, Lance dashed into the study and found the lights left on and one thing missing: the wand. Lance's feet seemed to grow wings as he ran down the stairs and into the backyard. He stopped when he saw Benji throwing a stick. Not just a stick, a magic stick. The wand, the magic wand, their grandfather's magic wand, into the air. Capricorn dashed after it. Lance watched as if in slow motion as the dog caught it in his mouth and snapped it in two. There was a loud pop, close to the sound of a cap gun, and a few splinters fell to the grass. The blood ran out of Lance's fingers as he walked up to the two pieces of wand to pick it up. What did you do?" he whispered as he lifted them from the grass. "What?" Benji said. "It's just a stick." "No, it's not just a stick," Lance cried. First he pulled out more hair and then took off his glasses and wiped his eyes as tears began to grow. "Why can't you just be... Lance had a hard time finding the words. His mother had often said that Lance needed to be more patient with his brother, that Benji was, after all, only 5, and 5-year-olds tended to be unpredictable. "Why can't you be sensible?" Lance yelled. "Why can't you pay attention? Why can't you get your head out of the clouds and get things right for once?" Lance felt bad as soon as the words came out of his mouth, and Benji hung his head and ran inside. "Why can't I get things right for once?" Lance said, wiping his eyes once more and trying not to imagine his grandfather's face when he saw his wand in pieces. He picked up the 2 bits of magic wand in his hands and trudged back in the house after Benji. Benji was not in the kitchen. "Benji," Lance called. "Benji, where are you?" Lance wandered into the bathroom and then the foyer, and was about to go up the stairs when he heard sniffles from the living room. Lance walked into the living room. He had never liked the living room, for the walls and ceiling were glass, and beyond the glass was the depths of the ocean. When Lance had first come to his grandfather's house, he had thought that it was only an illusion, but his mother had assured him that beyond the glass was the real ocean. He had even seen a shark swim by once. Heaven knows why his grandfather wanted his living room to look like that. Lance himself hated the feeling that at any moment the glass would break and the whole ocean flood through the neighborhood as its residents were eaten by various monsters of the sea. Benji was curled up on the couch next to Capricorn, his eyes brimming with tears. He looked at his older brother with a frown that matched that of Capricorn's. "Look, Benji, we're going to have to fix this." "But I told you, it's just a stick." "What's grandfather going to say?" Lance said. "You're going to have to confess what you've done." The tears increased, and Benji buried his face in Capricorn's fur. "I didn't know it was a special stick," he cried. "Honestly, there aren't any trees in the backyard." Now Lance felt even worse. He sat on the couch next to Capricorn, miserable. Capricorn began to lean against Lance. At first, he didn't notice. But it wasn't until the dog was actually pushing him off the couch that he said, "Move over," and shoved at the dog. This was followed by a squeal from Benji. He had fallen off the couch. As Lance tried to figure out what was happening, he himself was shoved off the couch. Sadly, the carpet had changed to a hard concrete, causing a tough hit for the both of them. "What?" Lance began, standing up and rubbing his rump. Capricorn was looking at him curiously, and the dog had grown to be the size of the couch. "He's big," said Benji, and he was getting bigger. Soon, Capricorn was forced off of the couch, for he had grown too wide, and there was no slowing down the rapid expansion of the animal. "Quick!" Lance shouted, pushing on the now horse-sized dog. "Get him outside!" But it was no use. Capricorn had become stiff with confusion and fear and would not move an inch. "Pull!" said Benji. They came around and pulled at his collar, but by now Capricorn had reached the size of an elephant. This scared poor Capricorn, and so the great floppy beast turned around, dragging the boys with him, and hid in the corner as much as his size allowed. "To the door! To the door!" Lance shouted, grabbing Benji's arm and yanking him away from the dog's sad, dribbly face. The dog's bum grew faster than they could run, however, and the door was blocked as soon as they could reach it. "Window!" But a giant paw blocked the window. "We're going to drown in fur," Benji said. But Lance had other ideas on how this would take place. Either they were going to be crushed by the dog's giant paws, or the walls and ceilings were going to break, and they were going to drown in the ocean. "Benji," Lance gasped as a big ear pushed against his chest. "I'm sorry for all the things I said earlier. You are sensible and attentive, and you do everything right. It's me that can't pay attention. I'm the one who can't do anything right. This is my fault. I'm sorry." Capricorn had moved around to face them, looking every bit as terrified as they were. His back began pressing against the ceiling, and a hairline crack formed across the glass. "Stop! Stop! Stop!" Lance screamed. With a jolt, Capricorn stopped growing. Lance had his eyes closed and was hugging Benji and was unaware that Capricorn had stopped. "He stopped," Benji whispered. Lance opened his eyes and saw that the dog had indeed quit growing. They waited for a long time, staring into Capricorn's giant eyes, not sure if he would start growing again or not. But after 20 minutes, it became clear that something needed to be done, for it was getting stuffy with the smell of dog breath. "Maybe we'll be able to get Capricorn to scoot forwards enough for us to fit through the door," Lance suggested. They shuffled around and squished and squeezed, but they couldn't even get past the poor animal's face. "Move, Cap," Benji said. "Hold on, Lance. Hold on. Look," Lance said. The hairline fracture had grown from the movement, and now water was leaking from it. "What do we do?" Lance said, pulling his hair out again. Well, suggested Benji, patting Capricorn affectionately on his nose, you can try what you did before again. What? You told him to stop and he stopped, Benji stated. Yeah, but that's not the reason he stopped. The magic probably just wore out. Capricorn says it's worth a try. Capricorn didn't say anything, Lance said. Yes, he did. Now tell him to get smaller. Lance looked up at the great, sad eyes in front of him, and then sighed and adjusted his glasses. Okay, get smaller. Nothing happened. See, Lance said. Capricorn says you didn't try hard enough. He said that when he watches Grandfather use magic, Grandfather concentrates really hard and says it really loud. Lance thought about Grandfather and what he would say if he found the two of them in this situation. He felt sick just thinking about the old, dignified face looking at them in disappointment. Shrink! Lance yelled. Capricorn shrunk slightly. Brightening up, Lance yelled, Shrink! 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 And with each shrink, Capricorn shrunk until he was the right size once more. You can do magic, Benji cried. Lance was so pleased with himself that he made a bow, and a salty drip fell on his head. Fix it, Lance, Benji said, grinning. Mend, Lance commanded in a voice that he tried to make sound like his grandfather's. With a sharp crack, the line across the ceiling mended, a little too suddenly for Lance's comfort. Let's go back into the kitchen and try to fix the wand, Lance said, looking at the ceiling, still terrified that it was going to break. With the two halves in hand, Lance stuck them together and said, Mend. But this time, nothing happened. When he picked it up to give it a proper swish, the other half fell off. How come I can fix the glass but not the wand? Lance grumbled. Capricorn says it's because you don't have all the pieces. Though Lance was sure that Capricorn did not say that, Benji had a point. But there was no finding the other pieces. They were somewhere in the grass, and at the time Lance had been too distracted with the horror of it all that he didn't even remember where Capricorn had bitten the stick. The three of them, after searching the yard heavily for anything that at least looked like the pieces to the wand, sat around the kitchen defeated. Let's just glue it, Lance said finally. I don't think I can handle Grandfather knowing that we broke the wand. Perhaps it won't change anything, and even if it does, wands get old, don't they? He'll just buy a replacement for it then, won't he? Lance began pulling out his hair. Sounds like a plan, Benji said, sitting back on his seat, not worried in the least. With difficulty, the two of them were able to glue the stick together and make it look almost like what it did before. Lance placed it back on the book and straightened it out, exactly as it had been. There, he said, with a more than guilty conscience. It never happened. Yes, it did, Benji reminded Lance as he closed the door behind them and walked down the stairs. Lance's alarm went off on his watch. We've got to give Capricorn the next pill, he said, leading the way into the kitchen. He took another stale cracker from the pantry and stuffed another pill in it. Capricorn started to cough. What's wrong with him? Lance asked Benji. He says he's got something stuck in his throat, Benji said, stepping over to the dog. Are you okay, Cap? Capricorn coughed and hacked until a tiny, round, white thing came out of his mouth. But that's the last pill, cried Lance, picking up the slimy capsule with defeat. You mean to tell me that you've been trying to hack this thing up this whole time? Don't be mean to Cap, Benji said, standing protectively in front of the dog. Lance cried and sunk into a chair. I give up. Here, Cap, I need you to take this pill, said Benji. It's good for you, and Grandfather wants you to have it. Capricorn looked at Benji with sad eyes and licked up the pill from his hand and swallowed it down loudly. See, Lance, he's a good boy. He just needs to be talked to. Lance stared at Benji through his glasses with evident confusion. It was a few happy, uneventful hours later that the sound of a car coming up the driveway was heard. Benji had been able to get Capricorn to take all of his pills at the right times. The dog had taken each one happily and without any trouble at all. Lance's toes began to buzz with anxiety at the sight of his grandfather walking up the porch steps. And when he actually smiled at Lance, his heart gave a weak jump into his throat. "Thank you for taking care of Capricorn," Grandfather said, patting the dog on the head. "You're welcome," Lance croaked. Lance quickly made his way down the stairs to his mother's car that was parked beside the garage. "Hold on, my boy," Grandfather said. "Come inside. Come sit. Let's talk." "I'm proud of you, Lance," his mother said, giving Lance one of her rosy-cheeked, warm smiles. Lance walked into the house with weak knees. "I'll just put these books away in the workshop," said Grandfather, walking them into the living room. Before leaving, he stopped and looked at the ceiling. Lance's gaze snapped upwards, expecting the crack to still be there. Grandfather pointed his long finger. "Manta ray," he said, and left. There was a manta ray swimming above, and Lance sighed with relief. "I've always loved this room growing up," Lance's mother said, sitting back on the couch. "I can't tell you how many interesting sea creatures I've seen swim by." "Lance, stop pulling your hair out! What's wrong with you?" "Nothing!" Lance almost shouted. His mother raised her eyebrows. "Oh, really?" "Yeah," said Benji. "Lance just messed up the bathroom and is embarrassed." "What?" Lance said. "No, I didn't." "Yes, you did, and you made me clean it up." Their mother looked at them with sharp eyes, trying to assess what they were trying to hide. Then Grandfather came back into the room. Capricorn ran up to him and jumped around his legs. "Hold still, Cap," his grandfather said, and took out a tape measure. Lance felt a shock run through him. Why was he measuring Capricorn? Did he shrink him to the right size, or was he still too big? Could his grandfather tell that the wand was broken? Lance began pulling his hair out again. "Stop that," his mother said, swatting his hand away. "Do you want to go bald before you're 18? "Let's see if that medicine worked," Grandfather said, and measured Capricorn. He frowned. "There's something wrong," he said. Lance's heart seemed to stop beating. "He's too small." Grandfather stood up and looked directly at Lance with piercing eyes, and then he looked at Capricorn. "Lance," he said, still looking at the dog, "did you give Capricorn too many doses?" "Too many?" Lance muttered. I didn't, well, he didn't take his first pill. He kept spitting it out. But I didn't give him too many." "You see, the pills were meant to shrink him down to the right size again. I had made some growing cakes for a customer's pig. I had made about 3 dozen of them, just to have extras. The pig was only supposed to eat 1. However, Capricorn got into the whole lot of them and ate every last one. He grew to be about the size of this house, you see. So I concocted a shrinking spell in those pills. If he missed even one, he would have grown back to his original size. But if he has missed one, as you say, then why is he smaller?" Well, Lance stammered. "Let's ask Cap, shall we?" Grandfather said, leaning down over Capricorn and looking at the dog as if the dog was talking. Could Grandfather understand Capricorn? And did that mean Benji could as well? Either way, Capricorn had seen it all. Lance's mother had turned to stone as she began realizing that they had not been at all as well behaved as they had promised. A painful moment went by, with Grandfather staring at the dog, who was looking right back at them. Lance tried to analyze Grandfather's expressions, hoping to get an idea of what the dog was saying. But Grandfather was a wordless page, and Lance was left to accept defeat. Grandfather was going to never trust him to do anything ever again. Lance had magic, but his grandfather, he knew, would never, ever teach him how to use it. After the moment, Grandfather straightened up and sighed. He looked at the ceiling where the crack had been. "It looks quite like you fixed it," There's not even a scratch. Grandfather, to Lance's surprise, was smiling. The wand that you glued together, Grandfather said slowly, chuckling, isn't a wand at all. It's just a pretty stick. I was using it as a paperweight. You must realize, Lance, that I never leave the house without my wand. Ever. Grandfather reached his long arm into his black coat and pulled out a shiny, sleek, coal-colored wand. Nothing at all like what Lance had imagined his wand looking like. There seemed to be so much magic in the wand that Lance could almost see it, a strange aura intertwined with the magical artifact. You did a terrible job, nonetheless, taking care of my animal. Capricorn told me he was scared half to death when he got big again. From now on, I'm going to get a professional dog sitter to take care of Cap. Lance looked down, relieved that he did not, after all, destroy his grandfather's wand, but hating that he had let him down, though the piercing glare that had haunted his imagination all day never came. The words, "I'm sorry," formed in Lance's mouth, but Lance thought that he was too sorry of a person to even apologize. He hung his head. However, Grandfather said, both you and your brother have shown Capricorn that you have the natural gift of magic. You, from what you have displayed in causing Capricorn to shrink, even without the medicine, something that even I cannot do. And Benji has shown that he can quite understand everything Capricorn says, something only a magic user can do. Lance looked up to find his terrifying grandfather brimming with pride. Lance, he said, Benji, can I teach you boys how to properly use your magic? I shall soon turn you both into wizards. Not before I first bring you home, their mother said, sighing. You boys are going to do absolutely nothing until you have finished reading your books for school, which I assume you did not finish. Lance felt that was completely fair. Though he knew it would be near impossible for him to concentrate, now he knew that he had magic, and that his grandfather was going to teach him how to become a wizard. The end. Thank you so much for watching my video and listening to my story. I hope you enjoyed it. So now it's time to talk about where the inspiration for the story came from. Earlier this year, my sister and her 4 children came to my house for a visit. Everett was just a teeny baby then, and they wanted to see him. Her children are too young to watch Harry Potter, for it is pretty scary for little kids. So they didn't really know what wizards and wands were all about. Although I myself quite like Harry Potter, I've watched the movies many times, and I've read the books a few times over. So my brother, for a present, carved me a wand a few years ago. It was a very beautiful stick. I think it was made out of poplar or birch. I don't quite remember what kind of wood it is. But it does look just like a stick. To anybody who doesn't know what wizards and wands are. So my little nephew was playing fetch with my dog. He was throwing the stick, and she was catching it and bringing it back to him. Little did I know that it was the wand that my brother had carved. The tip of the wand broke off, and my sister was very horrified, saying that she was very sorry that she let him play fetch with it. I didn't care, really, because it was only the tip. And the tips of wands can be sanded down and restored to look just as they did before. I also didn't mind, because that's where the idea for this story came from. So, with an accident comes a story. The style of the story, which is one of my favorite ways to write. I just love magic and wizards and fun, magical houses. But really the inspiration, like the style, came from my love for Diana Wayne Jones. She writes stories about magic, and if only I could write like her one day, be able to write a story that's just so fun, fantastical, and slightly stressful, I would just have reached the very top of writing ability. Diana Wayne Jones is the author of Howl's Moving Castle, which most people know from the Studio Ghibli film, but it was actually originally a book in a series of 3. Howl's Moving Castle, Castle in the Air, and House of Many Ways. Those 3 books are definitely some of my favorite fantasy books of all time, and I really, really recommend you read them. Thank you again for coming and listening to my story. If this is your first time here and you like this video, please go back and watch my others. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe, and I will see you next time.